Thank you everybody for coming to this session. Just a quick announcement, there is another session going on in the lobby, so if you leave the room, please be quiet in that area so you're not disturbing the session next door. Also, you probably all know at this stage, this session is being recorded, as are all of the RDM plenary sessions. So the other thing I wanted to say as well is there is an online notes document. I'm really grateful if you contribute any thoughts or comments or to that notes document during the session or just after it, but also if you could sign in your attendance at this session in that document. You'll find a link to it on the page, the web page promoting and detailing this event. So what the structure of this session, we're going to try and keep it quite friendly and casual and hopefully have lots of time for discussion and interaction. I'm going to just introduce myself first. My name is Aoife Coffey. I am the Research Data Coordinator in University College Cork Library, but I'm also project lead for an initiative to set up a national data stewardship network in Ireland. I'd also like to introduce my co-facilitator today. This is Deborah Thorpe.
Hi, I'm Deborah Thorpe. I'm the Research Data Steward at University College Cork. So I work very closely with Aoife. And for those of you who are attending online, I'm the one putting the comments into the chat. So hello to everyone online as well.
Okay, so this session is on promoting synergies between national research data management and data stewardship networks. So we've kind of gone through the welcome and the meeting setup, but this is kind of a rough outline for how we think the session should go. I'll give a little description of why we proposed this session and an update on our progress to date of setting up an Irish data stewardship network. And then we're going to hear from some other people. So when I first set up this, the proposed this Birds of a Feather session, I sent out a call through a few different channels. Did anybody else want to contribute? And some people kindly volunteered and have sent in slides. So we're going to hear from Curtis, who's from Skills for EOSC and TU Delft, Liv from the University of Oslo, Julia from the University of Bologna, Lee from Digital Research Alliance of Canada, and Teresa from the University of Vienna. And I'm going to call them up and they're going to give a little bit of their own perspective on research data stewardship networks and RDM networks. And then we're going to open it up for discussion. I hope that you have lots of thoughts on this and ideas, because I really want to steal them and bring them back home to Ireland to get our own network set up, because it really is in the beginning phase. So as I said, this is from our Birds of a Feather proposal, what we put together. What we find is when I talk to colleagues internationally and nationally within Ireland, is that a lot of the data stewardship networks or data stewards are often working on their own and they're very kind of underdeveloped. So we thought it might be a nice idea to have an open discussion about the potential for collaboration and what we can learn from each other as national networks. So areas to think about, and I'm just going to list them now so that you can keep thinking about this as we're talking up here. You know, the type of things we would love to discuss is, are there links to be forged between existing and emerging networks? You know, can we work together? How do we do that? Can we learn from the experience of others, the do's and don'ts, the success stories and the failures of how networks can work together? How to sustain a network and what network activity should look like. Sustainability can be a big issue, especially if you're largely, you know, relying on volunteering and there isn't a funding behind it to sustain an infrastructure. How do we, you know, keep that going? How do we recruit members and identify key stakeholders? Who are the key stakeholders? I have an idea of who the stakeholders are in an Irish national context, but I'd love to hear from other people. Have I missed groups in that stakeholder mapping? Examples of best practice and expertise, but also areas of uncertainty. Are there areas where you're developing a network, you're working within a network, but you're not sure about something, you're not sure about the next steps, and maybe we can, the group, the collective mind can help with that. And also an investigation of if there are areas of shared projects or resources, can we work together? Can we develop these things together? So next up is just a little brief introduction to, I suppose, the Irish national context. So much of the work around open research nationally in Ireland has come from the National Open Research Forum. And it produced a report in 2019, the National Framework on the Transition to an Open Research Environment. That document was written largely by volunteers working to progress the national agenda in open research. In the summer of 2020, things took another step forward. We had our National Open Research Coordinator appointed. He's here in the room. Hi, Daniel. And from then, work really began kind of in earnest. So we began working on this National Research Landscape, Open Research Landscape report. And that was published in December 2021. Following on from that, we developed a series of policy briefs to really dig into the issues that were identified and suggest potential solutions for those areas that needed attention. And specifically what came from those two documents in terms of the data stewardship side of things was that at a high level, there's a general skills and knowledge gap within the research landscape in Ireland. There's a general lack of awareness of the importance of FAIR and data sharing at all levels, not just at grassroots, but within the university hierarchies or the research performing organization hierarchies. Specifically in relation to data stewardship, what came across very clearly is that there was a lack of accredited training nationally. There's unclear career pathways because data stewards aren't defined as a professional career within our national structure. It's not recognized as a specific role within the national landscape. Sometimes it's part of somebody else's job, but they have another job title. It's not their primary function. And also there's no coordination or collective voice for data stewardship. And that's actually quite a big issue because as a data steward myself, working within a research performing organization, I had no direct route to the policymakers, to the funders. I was always going through some other group, and sometimes messages get missed or a little bit of Chinese whispers goes on, and we're not quite sure what we're talking about. So what happened then last year was the National Open Research Forum announced a funding call. For the first time, we had money to progress this agenda. And I applied. And through that application, we were funded to set up a national research data stewardship network. And primarily, I suppose, that network is still very much in its embryonic stage. It was just in autumn that we found out that the funding was successful, and we're still kind of in the setup phase. So that's one of the reasons I proposed this session. Then also what happened in November 2022 is the National Action Plan for Open Research was published. And that's a really important document because it really does give us something to kind of hang potential actions on as we progress this agenda. So this is our embryonic Irish Data Stewardship Network. We have a mission statement in draft form, because once we have kind of coalesced our membership, we will show them that mission statement and request feedback. So the Irish Data Stewardship Network is to foster, the mission is to foster, enable and advocate for the development of research data stewardship and data stewards nationally. And our vision is a sustainable and cohesive network of data stewards nationally, which will promote and support the secure and effective management of our national data assets and the transition to a fair and open research landscape. So it's pretty simple, but I guess from that, you can see that there's potential for a lot of different actions. There's something in there for everybody, we hope. And also this is in draft. We haven't coalesced our membership yet. And it'll be the membership that will really decide on what direction the network takes, what are their needs, and how can we support them. One initiative that we are really keen on launching soon is the idea of, could you be a research data steward? And this comes from work we did through the landscape report is that a lot of people are engaged in data stewardship, but it's not a core part of their job. It's something that is, you know, they're maybe doing like 10% of the time or 20% of the time, but it's growing. It's becoming a growing part of the role. And if they can recognize and get, you know, their line managers to recognize that actually I spend a lot of my time doing data stewardship, it allows them to access training and support through this network. We'll hopefully be having a conference in the autumn of 2023, and that's, I think, really when this network will kind of launch itself and start to become a functioning organization. So on that point, I'm going to stop talking for a while, and hopefully Curtis is here. Oh, great, Curtis. Do you want to come on up? And he's going to tell us a bit about what's happening in the Netherlands. So it's just this button.
Hi everyone, thank you for inviting me to talk a little bit about the Dutch context. That's why I'm here, but I'm also part of the Skills for EOS project, and it's quite relevant to this. So I'll say a little bit about that.
Sorry, can you just turn the mic a bit towards you? Thank you.
Yeah, so shall I repeat that? Yeah, so I'm here to talk a bit about the Dutch context, but I'm also part of the Skills for EOS project, so I'll stick in a little bit about that in the end because it's quite relevant. What's being talked about here. So there are many people who will know more about this than I do, because I just started in my role, you know, quite recently. But I did gather it was a really good exercise for me as well. So I think it's probably quite known that in the Netherlands, research data management, open science, and so on, it's quite taken. It's in the most part, it's very well. It's an ideal it's aimed for, and a lot of different institutions and organizations who are working together on this. So with respect to data stewardship networks, the largest one is the DTL, Data Tech and Life Sciences, and they started off with more from a medical point of view, together with Health RI, which is another institution of data stewards, but they merged together and they are the largest data stewardship network in the Netherlands, and they're now quite cross-disciplinary. So it's not just about life sciences or health data anymore. There are people in the social sciences, there's qualitative data, and this is quite a successful network that comes together very often with really good attendance and addressing real practical issues that data stewards would need help with when thinking about research data management, data stewards. There's of course 4TU Research Data, which is the entity that I'm associated with, and they're attached to TU Delft. And this is a repository that's it's associated with the 4TU Federation, which is for the 4 technical universities in the Netherlands, and there are a lot of data stewards also within that network, together with researchers there as well. And we'll come to a little bit in the next slide as to how they interact with each other. There is, of course, the Research Data Network, Netherlands, and they look at more like providing expertise and a lot of training to data stewards. And also there's an element of a networking there, because different cohorts that come through for training, they are encouraged to stay together, to meet up and to exchange best practices as well. There is the National Research Data Management Coordination Point, and they serve as a kind of a link between, so it's a government policy and then advising others who are trying to implement or trying to comply with all of the policy and the rules that's at the national level. And so they will try to tackle things that are too big for, say one researcher or one institute, and then try to be that go-between as to how to interpret and how to apply those policies and rules. Other networks involved will be, this is the Data Archiving Network Services. What they provide services and are also a repository, but they work together with some of the other entities here towards data stewardship and research data management as well. And then there is an very active open science community network in the Netherlands. And we'll talk about it in the next slide. Oh, there we go. Oh, that's not the other. Still wait. So, yeah. So here is how they all interact. So at the bottom here we have the data stewardship network, the big one that I talked about, and there's 4TU Research Data there. in the middle. So the RDNL, which is the body that provides a lot of training and a lot of expertise, was set up by Fortune Research Data and DANS. And then later on, another entity that's not here because they provide more infrastructure and services and so on, but they do contribute, is SURF, S-U-R-F, and they were also involved in setting up RDNL and LCR DM, the National Center. There, they also have a role in that. Then look at the Open Science Network. Now, there is a Open Science communities and international open science communities, network of open science communities, and they are run by some people who are associated with the ANS. And now every university in the Netherlands has an open science community, and they are also working internationally across Europe and in the Middle East and other places to set up more open science communities. And of course, this all contributes to how research data management is done. And they are also working with us at Fortune Research Data in Skills for EOSC to help to promote more networks across Europe within the project of Skills for EOSC. There might be a role for LCDRM and RDNL to be what we might call national competence centers, in that they will provide a sort of go-between between policy and between what needs to be done at the researcher level, at the data support level, at the institutional level, and possibly to work with sustainability for different for the different networks. That is something that's being looked at within the Skills for EOSC project, which I think I can just stick in a little bit about here now. So the Skills for EOSC project is looking to help with engagement and having some sort of common way to engage with the European Open Science Cloud, that is providing networks, providing different sorts of definitions, providing skills and training. And there are other of my colleagues here who are leading different parts of these projects, for instance, like Kevin, who sits here, and there might be a few others as well here. And there's colleagues from the LCRDM there as well, but maybe that's able to answer some questions when it comes to that. So I was very interested to hear that you're talking about this new network being set up, because one of the projects, and in fact the one that I'm leading, is towards helping to support and create new data steward networks across Europe. So there is support for this going on right now, and I would definitely like to speak with, if you're going forward, and anyone else here in the audience within Europe at the moment who are thinking about or talking about setting up different networks, to get in touch with me. I'm on the app there, or just search up Skills for EOSC, or just talk to me at any point afterwards. And I'd be really happy to engage with you, because it will work both ways. It'll help me to put things together, and I can help to support with that. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Curtis. So next up we have Liv. Come up. Thanks, Liv. It's just.
Yes, this is a one slider of the status of data management networks in Norway. So I come at this from the library side, but also as a researcher who is over average interested in the social technical aspects of infrastructure of research data management, and thereby the data stewards. What we have in Norway are different networks at different levels. Some are more established, some are in the becoming, and trying to define their scope and level of activity. So Research Data Alliance in Norway have a community that is distributed out in the universities, and different universities has a clear dedicated ownership, I think, to being part of that community as well. So it's quite strong community engagement from different universities. We also have the GIDA SAPI community, which has members from Norway, Sweden, and Finland, and addressing the indigenous population. There is the Dataverse network of expertise related to those who use that specific data archive, which is multiple institutions. That is a very active community using Teams basically as a platform, exchanging knowledge, asking questions, and getting help. And as expanding project from that, there is now the Data Curator Network for Fair Research Data that is trying to establish a community for data curation that cuts across platforms, addressing curation issues that is not just related to Dataverse or Figshare or any one specific, but general a place where you can help and get help when you're stuck with data curation issues. We also have some domain specific communities, specifically the life sciences one I listed there. There are also others that are in biology that goes specifically for data managers within given domains. One thing that is also, I think, an important aspect here are those that are connected to regions or institutions. So in the Bergen area, they have a regional data managers network that meet in person and have in-person meeting addressing topics decided by the members. The Arctic University of Norway are also in the startup phase of having the institutional data managers network. At the University of Oslo, I coordinate the institutional network for data managers, which is contain a board selected by the members and try to address those challenges that data stewards in research groups across faculties, museums, and so on have. And we see that some of the things that we address are more broad, such as EOS, and how can EOS be relevant for me and my research group, or specific tools that we are so not almost conflicted to use when we work with specific types of data. So for instance, how to work effectively in a given sensitive data service and so on. We also see that this is the community here is very eager to have like brief news about national or international reports and recommendations, and that we can use this as intermediate sort of channel between what people like me who think more than general about data management and the community internationally report and recommendations on that level, and actually find the communicate the outputs that are relevant to that person who is sort of data manager in theory, but maybe by title or role is an engineer or researcher in a research community. So that is sort of the landscape, how it works. We have, I think meetups is one of the key things here. Some they keep it online only, sometimes it's physical only, and sometimes it's hybrid, because meeting other people who are in similar situations, we can maybe give recommendations on how to describe the role if you're trying to find more recruiting people, or also exchange of knowledge within the network. There is in the project Data Curator Network, there is a lot of discussions about sustainability. How can we create a community with engagement, with sustainable, low maintenance way of working? Because this is something that we do in addition to all the other things we do. And how can we keep these networks at a level that makes it feasible to be part of those networks that are relevant to you without being part of 20 different networks, because that doesn't work either. So I think having clear-cut communities and goals and agendas will help. And we're also, we want to find out what are the right platforms to use. How can we have a community that is using a platform that is open so that others can search and easily find questions that have previously been asked? How can this be open to others that are not part of the network that might need or be interested in this information for their purposes and their work in research? Please let us know if you have the perfect answer there. And I think that was my 2 minutes.
so much. There's lots to think about there. So next up we have Julia.
Hi, everybody. So thank you for having me here. It's actually kind of impressive because I'm here representing my country and I would not imagine it a few months ago. So yes, I'm Julia and I'm one of the data stewards that are actually now working at the University of Bologna. We are a project that started just last May. So yeah, we are pretty new to the job and I'm really excited to be here to know everybody else that is doing this in Europe. In Italy, we are at maturity level that it's still not so high in terms of open science and per principles importance from the top-down national context. You can see here on the slide, we just had a few important steps during the last year as the National Plan for Open Science was released in June 2022. And as a part of the National Plan for Research, and it was the first time that at a national level, it was highlighted how relevant the topics of open science are for researchers. And it was, there are sections all regarding also fair data, fair principles, and support to research data management. And also in 2022 was signed the agreement on confirming the research assessment, the assessment on research reforming. So it was an important step that we think that it was being made at top-down context. But still, the bottom-up support to research data management is very strong. We have different networks like ICDI, or the Italian Association for Open Science, or the Italian Reproducibility Network, which are working on bottom-up base. So they are trying to create a network of experts and initiatives, in the case of ICDI, to work towards the infrastructure and support to communities which are dedicated to open science, fair, and of course with participation to the European Science Cloud. And also these associations are relevant in an international context. As we have an Italian RDA node, we have an Italian open air node, and there's the project Skills for Years that Curtis mentioned just before, and a huge part of this project is based in Italy. Asgar is the coordinator of this project. Okay, so as I was mentioning, the research data management network. Oh my God, everything is so wrong here, but sorry about the slide. So on a research data management network, I showed you what are the main players in Italy, but on a data stewardship network point of view, we still have a lot of work to do. I told you I'm recently was appointed as data steward, but me and my colleagues at the University of Bologna are the first ones in Italy that are defined with this professional name. Yeah, I don't know what to say. And but of course there are a lot of other people in other institutions, research performing institutions, like other universities or hospitals and other communities that are already working as a support to research data management, but they are not defined as data stewards. So what we're aiming to do, and we're planning to do it with the help of Skills for Years, is to start and try to understand how many people are working already in Italy as data stewards. So how many of us are already there. We will be presenting our experience at University of Bologna at the Open Science Cafe, which is an occasion that it's monthly organized by ICDI to discuss together with the research community the topics that are most important in terms of open science and research data management and fair principles. And so we are taking these occasions to start a call for interest to researchers and organizations participating to this meeting to map the Italian data stewards landscape and to try, we're hoping that we will be able to do that, to kickstart a national bottom-up network to start working together from now on. So yes, these were my 2 minutes, probably less because I talked too fast. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Julia. It's really interesting to hear where data stewards are, you know, not the ill-defined roles and stuff like that. It sounds so familiar. So next up we have Lee.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to speak with you today. I'm Lee Wilson. I'm the Director for Research Data Management at the Digital Research Alliance of Canada. And I'm really here today representing the work of my team and specifically one of my colleagues, Erin Clare, who's our data curation coordinator. And she runs our data curation team at the Alliance. So all credit for these slides and this work does go to Erin and her team. So our organization, Digital Research Alliance of Canada, also known as the Alliance, is a new academic not-for-profit funded by the federal government of Canada. We provide strategic direction and we coordinate, support, fund, and deliver services that are related to advanced research computing, research data management, research software, and cybersecurity. And we do this work sort of ourselves and in close coordination with many different partners in our ecosystem. Our member organizations and indeed the community that we serve span the public research environment. They include both secondary institutions, research hospitals, and academic or research-based not-for-profit organizations throughout Canada. So under the Alliance, RDM is composed of a national coordination and service delivery team, and we work very closely with community partners to deliver things like training and outreach, tools, platforms, and services. We support policies and best practices in research data management as well. And really at the core of everything that we do at the Alliance is our national RDM network of experts. So this is a grassroots bottom-up community of practice that's composed of over 150 information and data professionals from across 70 academic and research institutions. And we've been doing this work since about 2016. So very similar to RDA, the RDM network of experts consists of a number of expert and working groups. And these are largely aligned strategically with key elements along the research data lifecycle and include things like data management planning, sensitive data, discovery and metadata, preservation, and data curation. So given the time constraints today and the theme of the meeting, I'll touch just briefly on the work of one of our expert groups, the Curation Expert Group, which over the last couple of years has focused largely on efforts to grow curation capacity in Canada. And it's doing this in a number of ways, but one of which is through a series of virtual community calls and through the development of curation-related training and educational resources. So I would say this focus sort of kicked off in earnest in about 2019, and the Curation Expert Group hosted what was called the Canadian Data Curation Forum, which was in part a training event for curation practitioners, but also really about community building. So it consisted of a series of discussions and activities that were designed to identify some of the challenges and opportunities related to curation work, as well as to develop a shared understanding of the role of data curation within the larger data management and data stewardship landscape. So at that forum, participants were asked to envision what a national approach to data curation services in Canada could look like or should look like. And then, of course, in the course of our discussions, we identified a number of challenges around growing these kinds of services. So these were primarily a lack of clarity around the roles and responsibilities of data curators, the need for more training and guidance, the need for more highly qualified personnel within this space, the need for professionalization of these activities. And then, of course, all of this also needs metrics and positive measures of impact for data curation that we can use to communicate the value of these activities, as well as data stewardship more broadly to administrators, to our funders, to all of those folks that make those kinds of decisions, including local hiring decisions. So building off of that work and over the course of the next year, the Curation Expert Group will continue to explore what networked data stewardship services in Canada could look like. So this is a little bit specific to our context, but one example is we're exploring how we might embed curation services into, or just sort of in general leverage, a framework that has already been developed and has been operating for about 10 years in the advanced research computing sector. And this is a distributed approach that coordinates training and services, both regionally and nationally, but with the expertise and the practitioners embedded within institutions across Canada. So very much sort of a federated kind of a model. And then it's essentially how do we ensure that RDM is a part of this network, and then more specifically, can we get data curators working within our national ARC HPC centers? So this group will further explore both national and international initiatives to better understand the benefits and the challenges that would be associated with the various models. And we're also seeking national level funding to support this work, to help coordinate these national network curation services, with, of course, the aim of benefiting researchers across Canada, regardless of which institution they're working at. So on that last point in particular, I'm very excited to be here today to learn about how others are approaching this work, and to share lessons that we've learned in Canada. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Lee. So our next speaker is Teresa. And then we're going to throw it open to the floor. So I hope you all have lots of thoughts.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Teresa Calva. I'm the data steward coordinator at the Vienna University Library, or the University of Vienna. And I'm really excited to chat with you for a bit about data stewardship in Austria. So Austrian research institutions have been offering services around research data management support for the past 10, 15 years. And they've been focused largely on digital preservation and developing and running repositories. And for the past 3 years, we tried to really actively move towards data stewardship throughout the whole research data lifecycle and the research lifecycle. And that was very much within the context of a national funded project called Fair Data Austria, where we looked at examples of models of data stewardship in other countries, and we looked at best practices, and we tried to figure out ways we can, translate those models to Austrian research institutions. So we came up with these 3 kind of simple data stewardship models that work for us, starting with a contact point, moving to a data steward office, and a more complicated data steward network, like we know from, for example, Dutch institutions. And as you can see, I included some examples. So we have developed within this project quite an active group of data stewards, but the project ended 2022, and as it often is, we are currently facing the issue of, sustainability, and what are we going to do now that we don't have that sort of formal contract with each other, and we don't have that formalized form of network. Austria has a very active network and a very active community of repository managers. And they also do tend to offer some research data management support apart from digital preservation and curation, but they are not really currently covering kind of the whole life cycle and all the aspects of RDM. So that's kind of the issue that we're faced with, and we're trying to figure out ways that we can, keep the momentum from the project going and just keep working together. So I'm really excited to talk to all of you about your experiences in that regard. Maybe we can learn something. And wanted to briefly mention another topic that we're working on in Austria, which is a certificate course data steward. So we are, as of October, running a formal further education program for emerging data stewards from all around the world. We have 25 participants from 10 countries, mostly Europe, but not only. And we kind of designed the course very much around, obviously, competence acquisition, but we try to support peer-to-peer learning and community building. So this is kind of another aspect that we are considering, is how can we, you know, make sure that these new data stewards are going to be part of this network, both in Austria and globally. Shameless plug, the next round is starting in October. So if you're interested, again, the course is in English and it's open internationally. So you can check the website or come chat with me about that later. And yeah, that would be that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Teresa. I do love a shameless plug. Okay, so Debs, did you have a comment in the room?
Grab that microphone.
So for the next portion, we're throwing it up over into the room. As I said, I think all of us who have presented, we're all looking for ideas. I've put up a few kind of suggestions for questions that we could maybe consider in the room, but actually if you have off topic, or if you have a comment or something you'd like to contribute that's not quite on the screen, feel free to do so. Debs has the microphone. Please do wait for the microphone, because otherwise people in the Zoom room won't be able to hear your contribution or your comment. And also Debs is going to be relaying questions from the Zoom chat as well. Debs, do you have any?
Yeah, so I'll start with a question from the Zoom room, which is what's the connection of the Irish Data Stewardship Network with the RDA Professionalising Data Stewardship Interest Group?
That is a really excellent question. So I was on the RDA Professionalising Data Stewardship Network when it was first getting started and becoming active. Unfortunately, I had to kind of step back from that because I felt I couldn't contribute. I was very, very busy at the time, but I have rejoined that group since, and I'm hoping to build relationships with that network. I think that it's something that it's really important that we tap into that work and those discussions that are going on internationally.
It was, sorry, it was just also mentioned that there might be people from that group in the room. So if you are.
Hello, and I want to be your friend.
Well, I did have a question related to that, but I'll respond also, I think, to that one that was raised there. It strikes me that there's an overlap between what the professionalising data stewardship group and it is an overlap, and the questions you're addressing here, I think, aren't necessarily addressed by people who are thinking about professionalising a particular role. So you could end up professionalising data stewards and they still don't have a network. So they end up becoming professionals and they still end up with no one to talk to, working on their own. So I think that point that you're addressing is worth addressing, whether or not that other group exists and whether or not it succeeds. So to go to that, the issue about, do you need networks? And one of the things that strikes me is that first question, which talks about networks in the abstract, you're then focusing in on national networks. And I do wonder whether the right answer is a national network or whether you want to see broader. I don't have a fixed feeling about this, but one of the models which if you haven't already looked at, I urge you to look at, comes from a very similar group, research software engineers. So that in itself is a job title that didn't exist a few years ago. And it was produced essentially by disgruntled people working within research in the kind of, not unlike data stewards, where they're supporting researchers but not necessarily getting the credit for what they do, and often not even with a recognized job title. And they've gone down a route in which, there's now effectively professional societies in which they join, which are doing all the sorts of things you want to do in a network and more. I don't think you necessarily need to go that far, but it'd be interesting to look at that kind of model. But that, it strikes me, has some national elements and some transnational elements as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I'm really glad you brought up the Research Software Engineers Network, because we have looked at them as a group who were a really under-recognized role within the research landscape, a really vital one, who have become, you know, recognized for their key contribution. And you know, that idea of like, do we need a national network or is it an international network? I mean, that's really interesting. I mean, I think if it's an international network, I think there will still always need to be some, like the RDA, it has nodes within the national context. I think that would be a really interesting idea. Yeah, absolutely.
Can I just go back to the Zoom room? Just to make sure we get all those questions there. Could you tell us what has been the maximum benefit of this network, or will be, from the node perspective? For example, best practices, sustainability.
From the RDA node perspective, well, I don't know what the national maximum benefits of having an Irish data stewardship network are. It doesn't really exist yet, except in documents within the collaboration team that is putting it together. I think that what we're hoping to do is ask our prospective members what they would like the network to be, and that we build it based on their needs. Is something to explore. In terms of linking with the RDA, Ireland's a really small country. Everybody knows everybody. And I really hope to work very closely with the RDA in the future. I think that's one of the issues we've had with the RDA nationally within Ireland, is we haven't had structures or infrastructure or group to kind of bring us together to collaborate. So I hope that answers the same question. Do we have any more questions in the room? Comments? Yep.
Hang on, sorry. Oh, you do because of the Zoom.
Oh, okay, of course. Yeah.
Can you just hold it there as well?
Okay, it is a question in the comment. So from the presentations I saw, I'm Pedro Prince from Portugal. The presentations I saw, there are some links between the networks that are being established with the national already existing networks. So, and the view that I have for Portugal is that I want to establish a data steward network inside of established network, because I don't need to create another network. Maybe later we will need to have it one. So this is so just to have your comments about the way that you have integrated these networks inside of other networks, because I understood that in some countries you have that. For Portugal, we are being established the RDM forum, the Portuguese RDM forum, that we have a working group on skills and training, on repositories, on policies, and it's in the training and in skills that we want to create something like that, and we are already doing something related with that data stewardship. So it's just to have your comment about that, because in some countries I believe that is necessary to create a network from scratch. In other countries is just to create something, a component of the network related with this. And what are the benefits, or if there are any cons on this approach?
I think if we could have created a network within an existing network, we would have done that, because it is a much more sustainable way. You already have lines of communication and infrastructure set up. I don't think there was any directly relevant groups in our national context. A lot of the people working in research data management and in data stewardship in Ireland are within libraries, but we really felt when we were putting together the project proposal and in discussions with people that we needed to break out of the libraries. Data stewardship isn't just something that the librarians do, or it doesn't exist within libraries. And we felt if we stayed tied too closely to existing library groups or became a subsection of those groups, it would be difficult to engage with the wider stakeholder groups, you know, with researchers in various different disciplines, with IT support who are engaging in managing infrastructure, and some data stewardship as part of that. So I think we needed a new network, but I do agree, like building on an existing network is a really good way to go about it. And I think that's what they're doing in Canada, and it sounds really interesting. Lee, do you want to come in on that?
Sure. No, exactly that. So we did have the national RDM network of experts, and it just made sense to continue to leverage that work. So we have our curation expert group, and we envision that a national data stewardship or data curator network would very much flow from the existing RDM network of experts and likely receive, you know, strategic direction from, for example, from the dedicated curation group. So where those make sense, I think it's important to leverage them. And I mentioned in my talk to the existing federated network of research support professionals in the advanced research computing space. And so that's sort of another existing network, and a little bit of the history. So the Alliance is, as I mentioned, a new organization, and we're really an amalgamation of a number of existing or previously existing national organizations, and it was a bringing together of different functions within research support. And so one of our challenges now is actually to recognize all of the existing networks within networks within networks and start to bring them together or harmonize or cross-pollinate, or we're not sure exactly what it looks like yet, but yes, rather than building something entirely new, leveraging what you have. And then in our context, I think there's going to be sort of another round of figuring out how to bring together existing networks under a much bigger umbrella.
Another question just at the front here.
Yeah, I just wanted to build on something from the last point from the Zoom room, because I don't want to miss people in the Zoom room. So Lindsay Dowling, who you know, Aoife, mentioned that she's a data librarian in Ireland, and she wanted to echo Aoife's last point and add that a lot of the work is still being done. Sorry, it's popped up. On a goodwill and best efforts basis, and it hasn't been formalized, and it's often bits of different roles. So just echoing your point there.
Yeah, and I think that makes it difficult for people when they want to get resources for training or professional development or link in with colleagues elsewhere. They may not be sure how to go about it. Is there anything else from the Zoom room, or there's a question?
No, I'll take it here now. Just hold it in there.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So actually it bridges very nicely to my next question, because for one is the expectation management, second is the role definition. So when I say a PhD student, we know what that person is supposed to do. Now, when we say data steward, there are data managers, data librarians. I don't know if they are in here or not. So as a researcher, they move all over the world. So network or not, I think the most important thing to keep in mind is what their expectations, the do's and the don'ts of each of these roles, if they are clearly defined, it automatically helps to know where to go, even when there's not a network or not a well-defined network. So that's from a researcher perspective. And I don't want to immediately skip to the last point on who are the key stakeholders. Is that okay? Then and I work at SURF in Netherlands. So it's a IT infrastructure provider. That's one of the roles we play. So now when I want services, I can reach out to, but then if I want to reach a institution or a university, I can talk to the IT department, to the coordinator if there is one. And then I say, oh no, but what happens in the library? So I want to help researchers, but I sometimes don't know who to talk to. So then also from that perspective, I would really love to know whose role is what. Like I spoke to a couple of data, and immediately there was like alert, I don't touch data. Because I was like, oh, this is a service, let's talk to the researchers. Like, oh, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. Please talk to someone else, which is fine. I know, but that is never clear. Or some people say, oh, we work on the DMPs, but maybe not all researchers even know DMPs or use them. So my 2 cents would be expectation management on who's doing what and who's not doing it. Because then we also can find where are the gaps and fill in them. So I don't know if in the the network that we have discussed, if this is a discussion that has been had, and if researchers also have us get a say in this.
Absolutely, and this I can see hands popping up because this is hard
Yeah,
topic.
thanks. Niklas Jarborg from the Swedish bioinformatics infrastructure, Elixir Sweden. I think I'm following on from what you said, and maybe I'm repeating what you did say. I think the most important thing to start with is what is the role of a network, because that could mean very many different things in many different different countries. Sort of, is it in an interest group where you just want to get tips and tricks from other people working on that, or is it something more concrete, the hardcore professionals coming up with the best practices for your national context? Or is it actually a national service RDM services, support services organization? So if you work that out for your national, I think that's the first thing you have to do. What do we want out of it? And that will differ, I think, in different countries. Yeah. And about steps, I mean, you're probably aware of, there are these community building frameworks that are like Community Canvas. There are other ones that sort of people have thought about this. How do I build a community? And these are really useful tools to get going and thinking, well, it's like a data management plan for a community, sort of, in a way. So
That sounds great. I'm familiar with data management plan. So a data management plan for community building. Perfect. I think it's Curtis had his hand up.
Can I just pop back to the Zoom, just because there are things popping up in the Zoom. It was mentioned that a possible role for the international coordination of national nodes and chapters could be to create synergies on cross-cutting topics, such as data stewardship practices for specific disciplines. So I'm not sure if you have anything to respond to that.
It's a good idea. I think it's figuring out what those cross-cutting things are would be really useful if we were to kind of continue this discussion of national networks working together.
Was there a hand up?
Curtis has his hand up first. Just here.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Hi, so just with some of the things we've been talking about before here, with respect to whether we need a national network or not, I think that it really depends on the context of where people are. Because in some countries that might work, in some countries it may not work. Some regions of countries might be more relevant than a national context. You may have, for instance, I don't know, language differences within some countries, and that has a role to play. And in some countries, there may not be that many active data stewards, and then you cross borders with that. So I think, and in some of the work we've already done in Skills for EOSC was a mapping of networks across Europe, and we came up with about 330. It's in Zenodo, by the way. I'll have to find a way to share that with you. And another thing is that came out of that is there's so many overlapping networks. So a lot of open science networks are a lot of data there as well, and there's a lot of data support. Of course, a difficult thing to do, but many of the same people are in these different networks as well. And what, from our perspective, what we're trying to do also is, again, to build on what is already there. And then a lot of these people are already in the same networks. Yeah, I just want to echo about Canvas and about the international network of open science communities. They also have a really good starter kit that is applicable, and we are also developing one within Skills for EOSC that will also be applicable. And here we have a lot of questions about membership research. I mean, why should people join a network? Why should they stay? What's going to be with them? And there's a lot of questions that we are trying to answer as well. So I would appreciate everyone's answers here, and I would love to chat with other people to try and help with that as well.
Yep. Doing my exercise today.
Thank you. Really, I think following up from what you said, Curtis, and indeed what Pedro was talking about earlier, and can go back to the question of, do you need these networks? I think what is clear is that there is always a need for something that provides the kind of roles you've been talking about for data stewards. But whether you need specifically a data stewardship network to deliver that, is going to vary from country to country, from region to region. I mean, Pedro mentioned the example that you have in Portugal, you know, that research data management forum. I was there, and it's an excellent idea, and that's really performing that function along with a whole bunch of other functions, as you described to Portugal, and therefore there's no need to invent something alongside it. And I suspect there are one or two other regions again where there's something where you can say we can do what we need to do within something that already exists, and therefore, you know, has some stability, has and perhaps some other funding as well that you can tap into, whatever the stuff you need. But in other cases, you are going to have to create it because it's nobody's job. And then whether you're looking for something that's top down, where some national body is charged with the job of doing it, again, sometimes that'll be really easy. There's somebody, you know, waiting eager to take that role on. And in other cases, it would be far better if you just do something at the grassroots level. And it comes back, I think we've done, even within a European context, there's been lots of studies in the past about looking at different aspects of how you make things happen within RDM, how you grow, how you do these networks, which time and again comes to the conclusion, not that you need 27 different solutions for 27 member states, but also you can't have one solution for 27 member states. You perhaps can have 3 or 4 models and you choose which one you follow. And that being true in Europe, it's also true, I think, worldwide. So coming down perhaps to thinking, let's find 3 or 4 different ways of answering these questions and work out in your region, in your country, what's the best route to follow might be the best way to go.
Yeah.
Who's next, Aoife? Yeah.
Thanks. So I've been thinking about why you might want to build a network at a national level rather than at a regional level or some other kind of system. And it seems to me the obvious kind of thing you might want to do, and Kevin was hinting at this, is to work on some kind of policy development and put pressure on the policy bodies to come up with something that serves the interest of the community you're representing. And I'm wondering if any of the countries in which you're already establishing national networks have looked at those kind of issues facing that and how you might go about doing that.
Really good question. I wonder if I could pick on Daniel to talk a little bit about our Irish national policy landscape, because I suppose that gave us the opportunity to create a national data stewardship network. It was through that process of a landscape report, a national action plan, and then we got funded through that, identifying it as a key area. And then I know there's other questions ahead, but I think Daniel would be best placed to kind of answer your question.
I can try, and then I think Hannah was next behind. Yeah, I guess what we're talking about in the Irish context is what we've tried to do is marry the top-down and bottom-up process. So we've identified the need bottom-up and then garnered the top-down support. So that's come through the action plan and so on. I think the policy environments also needs harmonization. So that's something we're also going to work on, and it will overlap. But I think this is a somewhat separate stream. So to get this up and running is really the first step. Yeah.
Want to make sure we get to everyone.
Hi, everybody. I'm Hanna Lindros from the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences. I just really want to follow up on what Nicholas was saying. I think this whole, whether it's a national data stewardship network or a regional network, I do believe in the networks because everybody needs a context. But I want to back up even a bit more and say that I'm sort of keenly awaiting the results from both the EOSC task force and also the RDA professionalizing data stewardship, because to build a network like this, we still need to figure out what does a data steward do? And at the moment, there are very sort of varied ideas about a data steward. So for this to make sense, to do it in a regional or national context or a global context or whatever, we sort of need to pinpoint that. Otherwise, we're trying to connect people who may or may not be connected or connectable at all. So I definitely think this should be done, but make sure that you sort of pick up on what those groups are doing. I'll just give it to you.
Hi, my name is Yan Wang. I'm from TU Delft. I'm also co-chairing the Professionalizing Data Stewardship interest group. So, so first is an open call to everybody who want to collaborate and work on the interest group. But we do need people, we do need active members to work on current ongoing tasks and also open up for new tasks. And I think the interest group, we have different subgroups, and there was already a couple of reports produced during the past year by different groups. One of them was the model group on data stewardship model, and there they presented quite extensive insight about the types of data stewardship services and what type of data steward are there. The terminology could be one issue, but then the really diversity of the people, what they do, but having the same title. And at the moment, we have an ongoing task is more about the career track for data stewards. There, we also try to distinguish, try to identify different types of data stewards. And I want to also have a comment on the networks topic in general. I feel there's also lack of a kind of a classification framework about the networks, because it's all called networks, and it's all called data stewardship network or data curation networks. But actually, what does it mean? And I believe every network has a different mission, has a different purpose. And if we could have kind of a classification framework to have just a matrix to classify them and then map each of those network initiatives in, that already have a much better, clear view about what are these and what are we talking about. So, and I believe it might be a lot of work to create that framework, but we can also start with a new term I learned recently, MVP, minimum viable product. To start something simple, I feel that's very doable with all the expertise in this room. So if someone is interested, I will be very happy to have a more chat. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm from China, so we are doing some similar work in China. And in my opinion, to make this network, maybe we should first have some specific tasks to get the maybe repository or some other institutes to get involved and to help them to get the network to be really work. And then maybe we should have some public services or basic services, for example, maybe PID services or some assessment or some other public work to help the network to do some really to make it work. It's my opinion.
I'm just going to go back to the Zoom room. So I'm not sure when this has come up. So this came up a little while ago, but I just wanted to make sure I said it. Another cross-cutting topic. I know there are resources for building and sustaining communities and networks, but each one, different one, has its nuances. Having almost a support network of RDM networks might be incredibly valuable.
Yeah, it ties into the kind of the role and the remit in defining what is a network and what we mean. I think it was down the back. I'm not sure
who was first. I'll go to you first.
Okay.
And then you can go to.
Hi. Yeah, I'm. This whole conversation sometimes makes me. Conversations we have about metadata standards and how do we define terms, and do we define the term first, or do we allow for differences in the term because you have different domains and different communities? And so I wonder if a network of sorts, again, what is a network, that could be also discussed, could provide a means for more of the bottom up. I think I'm kind of echoing some of the comments already, but a bottom up gathering of information on exactly these definitions, and instead of assigning what is a data steward, figure out what are the activities and tasks that people do in RDM in their different nations or in their different domains, and then use that information to allow people to collect the activities that they want and define how they want, because maybe in one place they can't hire 15 data stewards, so part of that role ends up being a part of another title, and so on. So I think
that could be something a network, whether it's national, international, regional, or whatnot, could help sort out these, in the end, definitions, but without them being specific, hard definitions.
Yeah, that's a really interesting. I just want to pick up on that, and that's something that we are doing within our project group. Is we're looking at the emerging and existing competency frameworks around data stewardship, and we're kind of said, we recommend one for adoption nationally, but it kind of feels like we'll probably end up with an amalgamation because, as you said, it's, because it's not a defined role and it's sometimes it's part of somebody else's role. And data stewardship is really broad. It's so all encompassing and the different type of activities that can be within it. So I think, yeah, that's going to be, is a really key activity that we're actively looking at, like how do we build these competency frameworks that fit within Ireland, but also translate internationally, because the research community is really mobile and, move around. So you need to be able to pick up your skills and move elsewhere, Yeah.
Well, and data's changing so rapidly that in like 2 years, what we might define now might not even fit. We don't really know.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fine.
I think to build on that, there are some kind of subject-specific examples, and I'm sure there are more impactful research domains. But I mean, from my perspective, with a background in archaeology and cultural heritage, I'm not sure how useful it is just to limit it to research data management. I think there are other data managers and stakeholders that are relevant. So in terms of how archaeological data and heritage data is managed, often a lot of really important and impactful data is managed by community archives, whether it's Black archives or LGBTQ archives, or here in Sweden, there's a lot of the indigenous Sami population that maintain their own data, who, if we limit that to research data, they're going to get missed out of that. And that's going to impact on policy, is going to have real world impact on people's lives. So I think, in terms of stakeholders, we have to include those as well as policymakers as well, and include them as part of an overarching network.
I absolutely love your comment, and that is something that we've been having discussions about. We called it the Irish Data Stewardship Network. We specifically kept the word research out of it for that reason, because we do see it as hopefully growing. We're starting maybe within research because that's our expertise and frame of reference, but we do think that we need to go beyond the research sphere. Ireland's a very small country. For it to be sustainable and inclusive, it has to go on beyond research performing organizations. So thank you for that. Yeah.
And if I can follow on from that, I think, so I'm Andrew Hoffman, I'm a data steward at Leiden University in the Netherlands. I think even including research data, but also thinking about types of research data that are generally not present in settings such as this. So I'm a faculty data steward in the Faculty of Social Sciences, and I work largely with people who are doing ethnographic, qualitative, and interpretivist work. And I thought this would be an interesting venue to find people who might be struggling with some of the things that I'm struggling with as a data steward, and to exchange war stories and whatever. But it was even clear to me, at the end of yesterday, even after the social science interest group, that there's not a lot of attention being paid there. So I've heard this kind of domain-specific or discipline-specific approaches, or a need for these. And I guess it's just a plea to also consider, as you develop your networks, that even if data stewardship right now may be considered largely the province of, the hard sciences or the natural sciences or the life sciences, if what happens in your jurisdictions are similar to what's happening in the Netherlands, where people like me are being hired specifically to work with social sciences, and specifically in my case, qualitative and interpretive research, that those things are sort of accounted for even in how we think about what trainings are and how adaptable those materials, because fair data stewardship and genomics is going to look, I think, a little bit different than the fair data stewardship trainings that I either would get as a data steward or give to the researchers that I'm working with. So that's my grandstanding for today. Thank you.
No, that's absolutely like one of the kind of key issues that I think we really need to be conscious of. And I think you know, when I was part of drafting the National Landscape Report, and we repeatedly got comments that like, does this apply to arts and humanities and social sciences? Like, are we included in this discussion? And one of the things that they did early on is, rather than calling it open science, we reverted to the term open research, because we felt that it was a more inclusive term and could be more palatable to communities that maybe felt they were on the outside of those discussions, and bring them in, you know? So that's a really good point. So I know there's other questions, but I have another slide. I'm conscious of time. So this is, we've actually started discussing some of this, you know, how can national networks work together? Like, do we share common goals? And I think we have been seeing some of those cross-cutting topics come up. Could we develop shared resources? Is there kind of an opportunity maybe to create another working group as one of the existing interest groups within RDA? Is this a discussion that we kind of want to continue? Debs, is there anything in the chat?
Yeah, there was just one question about whether there's a registry somewhere regarding, and this could be for everyone, national level networks around the world. Do you want to answer?
I can speak for for Europe at the moment, and this is exactly one of the things that I will be looking at within my project in Skills for EOSC, is to harmonize networks that are already there and networks that will be created. And one of the plans is to create a space within the RDA for networks to connect with each other, and then anyone from around, any network from around the world would be able to join that network as well. So that's one thing that we'll be working on, if that helps.
That sounds really great, because when I was putting this together, I was like, well, I'll just contact people from like other national networks and ask them to contribute. And then I was like, oh, but who are those people? I don't know where to find them or who they are. So that sounds like really great. Yep, we have another question here.
Where, sorry. Yeah, there.
Just a remark on the format it might take, maybe I forgot the word, a community of practice would be more appropriate than a working group, which is set in time and has to do deliverables, which is not really clear if we just want the networks to meet.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And again, back into that sort of managing expectations when you get approached. Any other questions, comments?
I think there's something going into the notes about Skills for EOSC is trying to connect different networks within the EOSC scope. So I think that was what you mentioned. And there's also a link there to that someone's helpfully put into the mapping of existing professional networks work. Thank you. Thank you to whoever did that.
Yeah. So question here?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Tanya. I also work at SURF in the Netherlands, and I actually just wanted to say thank you so much. I'm a community manager, and there's so much going through my head right now. I have to do this, I have to set up that. So I think you just recruited a person into your working group, and also you are exactly my audience. I think I work with the ORCID Consortium in the Netherlands, and there's people there that also work at the digital competence centers, and there they also do a lot of training on DMPs, on data management and everything. I've only been doing this for 2 months, so I don't really have anything like concrete to contribute, but please talk to me. That's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you pass it back?
So I'm a data steward in Stockholm, and I've been working since 2 years. And it's very nice to hear about like everything going on. And like you said, define a role, and I'm still defining my role 2 years down the line. So, but one of the very good initiatives is this DTLD SIG network, which is started by some people from Netherlands, Luxembourg and stuff. So rather than creating parallel and going just on different branches, I think it's very good to follow something which has already been started. And I'm also an active member there, and we share notes. We already are working on a lot of like what our role defines and what everyone else is doing, because sometimes we also don't know what the other is doing. And it really gives us a perspective because we have meetings every month and we hear what others are doing and what it can be expanded to. And rather than defining into a concrete thing, it can just be taken as like data is so varied, the role can be varied as well. So that's my take on the data steward role as a working data steward.
Thank you, thank you. It's just so great because I feel like I'm recognizing so many of the same themes and comments in the room. And it is like when I first started my role in 2018, I was very isolated. I was the only data steward with that as my full-time position within my university. And there's very limited numbers of them around Ireland. And I didn't know those people or how to connect to them. And, you know, if I had a question, it was kind of like, okay, Google, help me out here, you know? So Curtis.
Yeah, just to echo, sorry, I didn't catch your name. What Paru said with the DTL DSIG, it's an amazing group, and it's not limited. It's based in the Netherlands, but it's not limited to members in the Netherlands. It's a very active group, and very practical things are discussed at the meetings, and all the notes and everything is available openly on their website. So you can, if you need resources, if you want to think about how we can work together with different people, what works in the network, what kind of things they're addressing, everyone is able to access it. And yeah, it's also a member of that group.
There's a question over here and a question down there. I'm not sure who was first. I think she might have been.
Mine's an immediate follow-up, if I can say two words, which is in terms of thinking about this DTL, DSIG, and the professionalizing data stewardship working group, it's also a really interesting resource for people who are coming towards data stewardship from elsewhere, and you can just show up, and it's what I did before I became a data steward. I went to a couple of meetings, and it's a really interesting place just to get a sense of what the conversations are that can even help people, you know, decide if this is an interesting place for them to be moving in their own careers. So I guess that's also just another plug for the DTL DSIG, which is not just life sciences anymore. The past two actually have been about qualitative data sharing. So it's nice to see this kind of diversity there as well.
Great, great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Diva Bloemen from KU Leuven in Belgium. And I actually have 2 points. My first being, I am one-fifth of the competence center within my university. And our job is kind of to translate the policy of the funders, but also of the university into what our data stewards who do the in-person support, what they should advise on. And something that we've noticed sometimes with people who are data stewards and are a bit lost at first because they're the only ones, that they sometimes go a bit rogue once they take part in a lot of networks, because they sometimes forget that there's also a university policy. So I think networks are great, but they can be a bit tricky sometimes for the people higher up in the university. And my second comment is actually coming back to a lot of things that were previously said about the profile of a data steward. My profile is primarily as the repository manager of the university, and that entails both just running the repository, but also further developing it. So guiding a team of developers. And they're also considered data stewards, but they are completely forgotten oftentimes in the networks. And it would be great if they can also connect with other technical people who take part in different parts of the infrastructure. And I've noticed that on the Flemish level, we also have a network, which is really great, but because the majority of the people there are the people who do the in-person research data management support, the ones that are in the minority get kind of left out because those are not the topics that are voted on. Those are not the things that are chosen when a discussion is led about what it should be about, because we don't have the biggest voice. But I think a lot of it can be won if the technical people are also involved, because they need to know what infrastructure should be built, and they can't just keep making up things. They need to get input. And I think the networks could also be a great place for that as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. One of my collaborators on the Irish project is from another group called Resin. And Resin was set up by our kind of infrastructure, national infrastructure body in Ireland, the HEA Net. And the resin group is largely for IT professionals and infrastructure people who are supporting infrastructure, but also supporting research. And he agreed to sit on our State Stewardship Network project to link those two groups together and to ensure that we can co-organize events, that we can bring those IT professionals along with us. Because I totally agree, a lot of that work does fall in under data stewardship and it can get lost or forgotten. Yep, Liz?
I just want to add to that, I think the institutional networks are very valuable because you bring people together who are actually quite close together, but they don't know how close they are and how much they have in common. And you also can address the policy level when necessary, so that things might exist that people are not aware of. There might be someone that are in that network that can solve their immediate issue, because very often it is that near to each other, so that you have someone working in a research group and you have someone from the IT department, and just connecting them in person might help sometimes. Or you can raise issues that are common across different discipline working with the same technology, and they can address the issues together. Sometimes that really helps. And we also see that exchange of code and packages that are used is something that is being exchanged in this institutional community networks.
Yeah, absolutely. Institutional communities are so important to further discussions and to look at how exactly we implement locally the national policies and integrate them. So it is 26 minutes past, and I'm just going to check, is there any other comments in the chat? Okay, we're good. Because we want to close on time, because I'm sure everybody's hungry and needs lunch. I suppose the primary question here is is this a discussion we would like to continue? Do we want to continue to think about how national networks can work together? I think Curtis has kind of given us a sort of vehicle. They're putting together a list, so at least we'll know where the national networks are. And, if there is interest, I think the RDA is kind of the vehicle to take it forward, because it's existing infrastructure, like what Pedro was talking about, and we can really leverage that community going forward. So show of hands, do we want to continue this discussion? I'm going to stare hard at people who don't put their hands up.
The online answer is yes.
Great. So I think just to kind of summarize before you all toddle off to lunch, I think that we're all working with some of this and trying to answer some of the same questions. I think we would like to continue this discussion. And also I think that RDA is a really good vehicle, and maybe, rather than creating a whole new interest group, that we look at the existing work that's going on and see where we fit within that. So what do we think? Or is there anybody who wants to say, no, you've read the room wrong? No, we're good. Okay. Oh, I just wanted to laugh on the comment that was previously made about the idea of a community of practice. I think that makes a lot more sense than setting up something to formalize it or whatever. To really have this exchange of day-to-day running of networks and such. Yeah, I agree. I think that this is not maybe a group that would have significant outputs or anything like that, but I think a forum where we can touch base and share resources that we've developed, or share stories of successes or failures, would be something that would be very helpful. Okay, can I get just a round of applause for the contributors, because I really did kind of blindside them. All of your comments and suggestions. I will be watching this recording over and over again. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.